Thursday, everybody. And now let's talk automation.
Hello, everyone, and happy Third Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our guests, Shail and Danilo, for joining us for a round two. This is the first time we've ever had a part two, but we liked our last conversation so much that we wanted to do it again. So as we are getting started with our now traditional icebreaker conversations, having our guests do their introductions, please, everybody, make your way into the chat and put in where you're joining from. And maybe if you've watched the last recording again, we're going to ask everyone what their favorite part of our last discussion was. Add that into the chat too. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and join our conversation as we get going. So to get us started, Danilo, I am going to come to you to give a quick introduction and share what your favorite part of part one was before we jump into our discussion of the beyond a little bit more.
Hi, everyone. Good to do round two of this. I'm Danilo. I run AI automation programs mostly. Part one was very interesting. We got into basically the multifaceted problems and opportunities that automation and AI can bring us. And I think, Shail and I and we brought a fresh perspective on some topics that people should be considering. And I think this second round will be even fresher. There'll be a lot of cool ideas coming out, a lot of things that you guys can take away from it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
And I was muted there like Kieran for a second. Okay, so Shail, I am going to come to you to do your introduction and share what your favorite part of that first round was.
Emma on the half birthday of Third Thursday. Really exciting to see that. My name is Shail. I'm a thought leader in the intelligent automation and RPA space. I think most exciting part of the first part that we did was talking about the future of work and how automation and AI enables that. I think what's super exciting about this is that we're actually talking about what is in that future of work. What are the collection of technologies that we're going to see and where that's going to go? So I'm excited about the discussion.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Kieran, my co-host, can you take a second to introduce yourself and share what your favorite part of the last discussion was?
Yes, and I am off mute as well, so that is progress compared to last time around. Like I'm Kieran. I am what I call a digital transformation expert. Been in the industry for about the last 25 years. I'll argue I look younger, but sadly not. I've worked for lots of companies across multiple industries, delivering them millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of value. I should ask them for some of that money back. My favorite bit was Shail's comment, skilling me softly, because it described a phrase, a song that I remember, and a phrase that was beautifully put that just says, look, we're in a new economy, we're in a new age. We need to get people ready for that digital automated future, and therefore lifelong learning and skills are absolutely key. Really looking forward to continuing the conversation today with a twist and some new topics as well.
Wonderful, thank you. So just to give a shout out to those that did follow instructions and spend some time putting in where they're joining from, we've got some folks coming in from South Africa. I think I saw down in Tennessee and as well as Toronto. So we've already touched a couple of continents starting this morning. So that's good news. And so we will dive into some of our conversation. So as we talked about last time around, a lot of our first discussion was focused on automation. We talked about how to get started, where we thought trends were going to head. And today our topic is going to be focusing on this idea of what the beyond looks like in more detail. And talking through, Danilo, you pushed us a little bit and you said, we're supposed to be thought leaders in this space. Now let's lead the thought and talk about where we think the industry is going. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to give some predictions. We're going to talk through things that maybe are a little bit beyond our standard automation conversation, because at the end of the day, we're not operating in, this closed loop with RPA, and standard business process automation is all that's driving digital transformation. So to get us started, Shail, I want to come to you and talk with you a little bit about the ideas that I've seen you posting about as we look at the technology landscape, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in software companies and in the industry in general, and kind of these collections of capabilities coming together. Can you share some of your thoughts on how that will impact digital transformation and companies that are heading into this?
Sure. I think, look, it's important for us to understand why the consolidation is happening to determine how it'll impact customers. Automation started with two sets of promises that unfortunately have not transpired. One of them was about connecting disparate systems that don't talk to each other with easy UI-based automation approach. And number two was unleashing massive amounts of data that originally was not accessible or resided in the minds of the human who was executing the process. But that's not how automation has grown up. Rapid investments in this space have resulted in gravity-defying valuations, which have led to TAM expansion, total addressable market expansion, into adjacent technologies that are not integrated with each other. Well, and I would even say cannot be integrated with each other when based on a very fragile bot-based architecture. And this rapid investment in the market that I'm talking about is in the tune of $7 billion in the last 3 years into leading automation players. While this demand from customers has surged, the unit economics of the market, particularly with the larger players and the high valuations, have been a signal for other established giants to come into this market and offer a minimally viable automation solution to attract their customer base and basically extract incremental value out of this while staying true to their core product. So we've seen Microsoft, IBM, SAP, ServiceNow, and probably 6 or 7 others who have spent merely $800 million compared to the $7 billion that was spent to enter into this limited entry barriers market. So what does this mean for the customer? Number one is the democratization of automation. So RPA and specifically attended automation is now a commodity being offered for free by Microsoft. Some vendors argue it's not robust enough, but I think that argument falls flat when the CFO says, we have a Microsoft license and RPA is for free, use that. And the robustness will absolutely get there. I think number two, it offers customers a choice of AI solutions much broader than what they can get from traditional RPA. Given Microsoft's investment in AI, watch Amazon, that's next, and Google as well. I think the third benefit it offers customers is RPA inside, which is a new norm as companies bundle automation and potentially other solutions. And this is why you're seeing pure play RPA companies like UiPath now talk about the next pivot to semantic AI and API integration, while perhaps not emphasizing as much on some of the other technologies like process mining, testing, which was the original TAM expansion story. And lastly, I would say, there is convergence. The potential for these several automation technologies to converge into a hyper-integrated, hyper-efficient, hyper-automation set of converged technologies. Sorry, I was a bit uncomfortable there that the last 10 minutes have passed and we haven't invented a new term in automation, hence my overuse of the word hyper on my part. I got carried away. That'll not happen again, Emma.
Making up more terms in the industry that is already full of different words and terms to explain stuff. Before I come to you, Danilo, with our next question, thank you, Shail. I also made a promise in the chat that I would give a call out to Brazil as well, because I missed that when I was doing my roll call earlier. And I've seen even more coming in from the UK, and I think I saw a couple of other locations too. So thank you for kind of talking through that. And I think that idea of democratization of technology and automation is something that is floating around a lot within the industry, and I think has large potential to change how we're looking at digital transformation. And I think that feeds really nicely into talking about this next question that I have for you, Danilo, where we take a look at the changing landscape of technology and knowing that there are constantly emerging tools coming out that are going to affect this idea of digital transformation. So, there's blockchain technologies, which automatically make people start thinking about cryptocurrencies and the Internet of Things, and AI is getting further and further along on its journey every single day. Can you share some of your thoughts on how these emerging technologies either are starting to impact digital transformation and some of those companies that are maybe ahead of the game, and how it will impact organizations moving forward?
Sure. For me, the future is bigger than just AI. Of course, AI is a big player in it. World Economic Forum coins that as the fourth industrial revolution. It's going to create anything between $7 to $15 trillion worth of extra wealth in the next 9 years, so not very far away. But we have to be cognizant that this is a technology stack that's actually in the middle of many other things like blockchain, cryptocurrencies, giving us all kinds of alternatives there for contracts and alternatives to fiat currency. You have IoT, Internet of Things, which is a term that's kind of quietened down, but that's huge in terms of smart homes, smart businesses, smart manufacturing, smart transportation. And of course, you've got other things such as quantum computing as well. If you combine the wealth that these four major technology stacks and opportunities will provide, we're going into multiples of tens of trillions of dollars. And if you look at the transformational impact that these four movements are going to be creating, I'm very confident that 15 years from now, if I went into a coma and I woke up, I wouldn't recognize the world that we live in today. 15 years is not very long, in terms of time horizon. So a lot of these four technologies are going to converge. They're going to come together. This is where a lot of the terms of Industry 4.0 comes from, the convergence of these four powerful technologies. We already see examples of, and I think it's relevant to bring it up because we see examples of companies who are using AI, who are using blockchain, and who are looking at using the power of quantum computing. If you combine and realize that these companies are going to get better at this, they're going to mature at this, they are going to be able to completely transform their companies. So I think it's a good topic to bring up today because, if a company is going to become a totally different company over the next, 4 to 5 years because of these four technology stacks, then it's worth mentioning so that people listen up. And for those who aren't even looking at automation, they should really be looking at, okay, well, there's other things happening as well apart from AI. And if companies can crack the code of combining all of those four together, we're talking about a major competitive landscape shift in comparison that we have today. So I think it's worth talking about. I think it's worth bringing up. I can't even fathom myself the impact this is going to have on the world where we live. But I just sometimes we talk about AI in isolation, and I'm guilty of that because that's the area that I work in. But I've been learning a lot more about how all of these different technology stacks are coming together, and it's definitely something worth mentioning. And there are many examples of this already in manufacturing, where these three or two out of the four are being used very effectively. In oil and gas, energy, oil and gas companies, where they're exploring for oil, the way they're extracting it, they're using 2 or 3 of those 4 technology stacks. And of course, there are some companies that provide us with the backbone to those 4 technologies or services as vendors, 2 or 3 out of 4 of those technology stacks as well. So we're getting closer every year to being able to use all 4 of those technology stacks. And when that happens and when it clicks, then pretty much the impossible is going to be possible very, very quickly.
I think you hit on it from the standpoint of kind of that idea of we can't operate in a tunnel where we only talk about automation. And I think that was something that as we were prepping for this session, you pushed us hard on. And I think this is Ryan. It doesn't have his little picture here, but talking about how working in healthcare, they can completely see the benefit of these combinations of technologies and these capabilities coming together. I know I have a number of customers that operate kind of in the biotech space, and seeing the stuff and hearing the updates of what machine learning and different algorithms are bringing forward from health outcomes, and being able to diagnose cancer with a single blood test and that kind of thing just absolutely blows my mind, and I get super excited about that. So I want to come in. Oh, Danilo, I think you maybe have an example within healthcare. So I'm going to come to you one more time to share that.
Very quickly, so healthcare is very interesting. It's definitely an area that's been using, a good number of the 4 technology stacks we just talked about. So, without mentioning too many names, there are some healthcare companies where, they are using AI in order to provide bespoke drugs. So instead of taking 3 or 4 pills of, these universal dosages that you get in pharmacies, creating a pill that's just for you, that has all 4 of the pills in one, dealing with their manufacturing in a way that it can be produced effectively as well. Predicting, when you're going to get sick next by looking at your history, by looking at where you're going, what you're eating, at home, right? Having different devices that can measure your temperature, that can measure your susceptibility to getting infections, and then feeding that to Zoom doctors that you call in on, and they can read the readings of the devices you have at home. I've seen devices that are being produced today where are letting your kids if they're going to get sick before they get sick by looking at temperature spikes and are they having nightmares and things like that. Different devices that go in our toilets to analyze our pee. There's a lot of clever home devices which are being launched in that space. So the healthcare industry is definitely going to be transformed. The way that healthcare is super inefficient in the fact that every hospital operates in its own way, even in the NHS in the UK, where there is a national health system, hospitals do almost behave by themselves. Blockchain is being discussed in many areas. It's already being tested as being the thing that fixes all of that, unifies everything, and also tries to fix some of the prices in the US in terms of providers being able to charge whatever they want for drugs. So there's a lot of examples on that. And also, finally, I have also seen trials of quantum computing in order to be able to compute all of this. When you're looking at countries that have 200-300 million people, how do you compute if you know who's going to get sick next, and also adjust their healthcare plans in accordance to that? So there's a lot of work being done on this, a lot of analysis being done on this, and it is using AI, it is using automation, it is using blockchain and quantum computing. So healthcare is a great example of all 4 technology stacks being used today. So I see big healthcare changes coming up in the next 5-10 years.
As a quick segue, I'm just going to point at this and some of the enhancements that they made within their last release of the Apple Watch, and being able to feed some of that data directly to it. We're going to start seeing some of the consumer things converge, I think, a lot more. Kieran, I'm going to come to you, and I am going to pick up on maybe not our last episode with Shail and Danilo, but last month's Third Thursday, when you took the last, I think, 35 seconds of our session to, I called it the philosophical thought nugget drop of, are we creating the future of work that we want? And as we start to talk about these other technologies coming in, the ideal and the thing that we all talk about is more ability to have work-life balance and bringing humanity back into processes and removing kind of the repetitive work. But right now we're kind of in this weird spot where some organizations are seeing, automations coming in and dumping even more work on people, or we were talking about hybrid work and remote work maybe not being exactly as easy as we had thought it was going to be before we joined. I am personally a little off kilter going into my my hybrid work environment. So can you share your thoughts on this idea of how do we create the future of work that we'd like with all of these emerging technologies?
Yeah, I think it was I love your philosophical thought nuggets as well. We'll have to use that somewhere. It's a big conversation, Emma, because I asked the question out loud, have we actually thought beyond the idea of automation? Because we're so convinced about it. And we need to digitize, we need hybrid work, we need automation, we need. But then you go, okay, well, what will the future look like? And I don't find too many people able to explain it because we haven't discovered it, and things change all the time. It was the conversation you were referring to was myself and Valor Svanson, and we were talking about contact centers where there's a lot of automation has been applied, chatbots and email triage and RPA and whatever else. And in that example, what actually happened was the agents who used to answer some of the more mundane calls, as we would call them, they actually use those as a break between the complex calls. And the complex calls normally involved, complaints and angry customers and whatever else. And the challenge with that was it was complaint after complaint after complaint, complex after complex after complex. And then that doubled down with the challenge that everybody's at home at the moment. So where you're in work, you get a really difficult customer conversation. You're able to, kick the bin, complain, go outside, get away from your desk, complain to a colleague. But once you're at home sitting by yourself, you can't get away. And then technically and mentally, someone is physically or verbally abusing you in your home, and you've no real escape. So in that context there, you would really worry if we've thought through the consequences of automation, which originally sounded really, really keen. Now, don't get me wrong, what I'm not advocating is that we don't do automation, but it smacks a little bit of years ago. I could see the same argument unfolding when AI was involved. We need AI, and nobody thought beyond the next bit. And then we started to have conversations around ethics. And then we discovered AI wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Again, now we're putting checks and balances in place to make sure we get AI for good. And as Danilo mentioned a moment ago, there's tons of uses for this that are really beneficial to society, just like there's tons of uses for automation and digitization to be really beneficial for workplaces. The bit I am arguing is just let's stop for a moment, think that little bit ahead, a la the ethics conversation in AI, and let's just make sure that we're delivering the future that we want and that we're really trying to help our colleagues in work understand what that future looks like and help them cope with it. And that's mixtures of probably, skills, that's mixtures of remote support. And by the sounds of things, what I was talking to Valor, for those agents who are getting emotionally and mentally abused, that's also putting support mechanisms in place to help them cope with this bright and breezy future. I think we can get the balance right, and it'll certainly suit. But there's a whole host of lessons to be learned. Let's just make sure, Emma, we learn those lessons as we progress, not just rush to this end state for the sake of rushing to it at a hasty pace.
And I think you're after my heart when you start talking about the people side of change and thinking about not just how nice it will be when we automate the mundane work, but how does that affect the people that are then left doing the remainder of that work. Ryan commented that the local pub tender enjoys his complaints when he goes out. But that's part of it. The last year and a half, we maybe haven't had some of our normal coping mechanisms of social interaction. And just like you were saying, being in our houses and not having that normal time to chat with someone in the break room while you're refilling your coffee that you typically would have. And so I think that those are really important questions to ask and think through and have some of those discussions of what does that balance look like and how do people's roles change. And it can't just be taking on all of the heavy, complex work, because that might not give us the reprieve that we're looking for. Danilo, I want to come to you with our next question. And, we talked about how these technologies have potential to really change and disrupt the way that we see the world and the way that we work. But from an organizational perspective, Shail mentioned the idea of when your CFO says, RPAs for free from Microsoft, you go do this. Ultimately, there needs to be a cost benefit and there needs to be an advantage for the organization to bring in automation. Can you share a little bit on your thoughts on maybe how these new technologies and automation can help organizations improve their valuation, and really how do you measure that?
Sure. So there's two sides to this, and a lot of battle scars have taught me this. So there's two things here: the ability for technology to create efficiencies and to unlock new revenue streams, and the ability for a company to be able to track those benefits. To me, those are fundamentally two very different skill sets, and very few companies today have both of those skill sets. So that's one thing that people need to kind of get a handle on, because a lot of times I see very good automation AI programs doing some great work. I mean, they're performing thousands of hours. They're letting people go home earlier, improving the client NPS scores. How is it that then the business can say, well, this is not providing a benefit? It's hard to track the benefits. Just because the benefits are hard to track doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that we haven't evolved yet to a point where we know how to track them better. Companies don't have a financial reporting or a budgetary process in place that allows them to do it efficiently. That's something that will catch up over time. I think that's going to definitely give automation AI a lot more credit than it's been given the last couple of years. But fundamentally, those are different skill sets, and people have to realize that. So company valuations, right? They work off a multiple. So if you're a fintech company, you get a multiple of 10 or 20x, and that's 20 or 20x of your top line revenue or your EBITDA, for instance. And there's also different multiples of earnings that you can do there as well. So if you have an automation program that's essentially making the company more efficient, it's allowing you to do more work with less people, or allowing you to bring in extra revenue streams, you are inherently increasing the top line revenue or improving the bottom line profitability, which means that when you then times that by a multiple in order to get a company valuation, you have a higher valuation. So that's logic sense. I think a lot of people don't connect the power of automation AI with the actual impact that it can impact the valuation of a company. So I think after writing an article about that back in February with UiPath and ISG for Business Insider and AI Magazine, a lot of people started realizing, oh, there actually is an impact here from automation in the company valuation. There may not be very much right now because the skill of tracking benefits to the balance sheet and the profit and loss accounts are not there yet for most companies. But when they finally get their heads around that, improve their budget processes, they will finally see that automation AI actually has quite a good impact on company valuations. So I don't want to labor that point too long. Definitely something to give people food for thought. I'm sure we have other things to discuss as well, but something to definitely not forget about and consider.
Yeah, so we're, of course, as always, running a little short on time here, but I do want to come to you one last time, Shail, to talk about the last time we had a conversation. You shared a little bit on your thoughts on voice technology and the impact that it could have on work. Can you share a little bit on that before we have to wrap up for the day?
Well, just said about measurement of digital transformation, the outcome of digital transformation. I think as it relates to voice technologies, I believe the work has already changed with voice. We're in an era of embarrassing typos using Siri to type emails, to streamlined workflows that reduce communicative friction. I think Google has already introduced the ability of voice to schedule appointments, for instance. I think we're at a point where if a user wants to review something or look at a dashboard, let's say with past accounts receivables as an example, enter a timesheet or find a contact for our prospects, which they can do with a mouse and a keyboard. Why not do it with voice? Speech is one of the few effective and faster computer interfaces than moving a mouse and typing. While we're not at a stage where, sprinkling of what is called neural dust, which is many small wireless implants in the brain. Yes, it's a real concept, neural dust. While we're not there yet, I think voice is making a huge impact. And we're in an era of convergence of voice and automation where workers can trigger a process that automates administrative data entry, logging, tracking, and so on. And we're at a stage where we will finally have a uniquely human job. Technology will allow workers to focus on strategy and creativity and the elements that make us, uniquely human. And as I've said before, we don't need to have a conversation and then go back and summarize it, email the actions out, check on the action items and perform the real work outside of the conversation. I think voice technologies will contribute to a time when work will be the conversation.
I don't know if the world is ready to get what's inside of my head with that neural dust or not. We'll have to, I think that will remain to be seen if people actually want to know what's flowing through my brain on a day-to-day basis. It's a little like a dog chasing a squirrel at times. So I see that we are just about to hit our 30-minute mark. So I want to take the time to thank you, Shail and Danilo, for joining us again. It was a pleasure to host you guys for a second round. And one last note for everybody, in the chat, I'm going to put a link to a video that I kind of bulldozed Kieran into being a part of as we're celebrating our 6-month anniversary, sharing some of our favorite memories. And as you can imagine, Shail and Danilo's last episode was a part of that as well. So I'll put the link in there for anybody that's looking for a little extra Third Thursday today. But thank you everybody so much for joining us. And as a kind of final note, our message for today is really to start to open up your mind to what the full potential of digital transformation means above and beyond just simple automations. And there are a ton of emerging technologies that 5 years from now are not going to be emerging, and they're going to be a part of our daily lives. So rather than being surprised when they pop up on the scene in a few years, let's start being thoughtful on how they can impact what the future of work looks like. So with that, everybody, thank you so much and have a happy Third Thursday.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Shail and Danilo. Thank you, everyone.